Have you ever heard of a hospital room that disappears, and a nurse that no one can find afterwards? It sounds like a scene from a movie, I know, but this story is real. It happened in an ordinary hospital, with ordinary people, but with a detail that no one can explain to this day. A detail that defies logic, science, and even time. Stay with me until the end, because the last detail of this story is the most unbelievable. And it may change the way you see the world. Imagine that someone you love is between life and death. You are exhausted, without answers, and everything around you seems dark. It is at these times that faith is often put to the test, but it is also when extraordinary things can happen, and it was exactly at this point that she appeared. A nurse, different from all the others, a serene presence, sweet eyes, a firm voice. She seemed to know exactly what to say. She exuded a calm that did not match the chaos of the hospital that morning, but what no one expected was what came next. She offered help, led the patient to a room. But this room had no number, no sign, no identification, and no one else seemed to have seen it. Was this just a coincidence, or a sign? If you've ever felt like someone invisible helped you, you need to see this. What you're about to hear may surprise you, because there are times when divine intervention disguises itself as a person, and maybe this has happened to you, and you didn't even realize it. As you listen, think, what if this were you? If, at the most critical moment in your life, an unknown person appeared, changed everything, and then simply disappeared, as if they had never existed. There is something here that no one notices, but when you understand, everything changes, and you will never ignore these signs again after this. This is a story about hope, about faith, and about something much bigger than meets the eye. There is an unseen presence at work behind the scenes of this story, and it didn't reveal itself by chance. The ending may seem impossible, but it happened. Comment if you've ever felt something like this. You're not alone. Have you ever felt like something was protecting you? Without explanation, maybe this story will help you understand that there are forces working silently behind moments that seem simple, but are absolutely extraordinary. This story begins like any other, but ends with a sign that not even science can explain. And it all starts that morning, when a door with no number was opened, and the patient, who hours before could barely breathe, now rested with a serene, almost heavenly expression. Room, silent and cozy, seemed to be out of time, as if it were a place where the sky touched the earth for a brief moment. The equipment began to register something inexplicable. Her vital signs returned. Her fever subsided, and her breathing stabilized as if an invisible force had gently taken control. Outside, in the hallway, the family was still crying, but now, with a different feeling, a sudden relief, a peace that didn't come from medical explanations, but from something deeper, something you can't see, but feel. When they asked about the nurse, the hospital staff just exchanged glances. No one knew her. No one had put the patient in that room. And, to everyone's surprise, the room simply didn't exist in the records. If you've ever felt something similar, as if someone was guiding, protecting, or healing you, even without explanation, tell me in the comments. Maybe your story is also one of those signs that we only understand later. Maybe someone, silently, is waiting for exactly what you have to say, and your comment could be that sign. This channel exists because there are people like you feeling, awakening, believing that there is something greater behind life's coincidences. So, if this spoke to you, like the video, and show that you are not alone in this. Every time you like, comment, or subscribe here, this message finds more hearts. It is with your presence here that this voice gains strength to continue. If you feel that this type of content needs to reach more people, subscribe to the channel right now, because this journey doesn't end here, and the next stories can touch you even deeper. This space is created by those who believe in the invisible, the inexplicable. And if you are one of those, show me that I'm not talking alone. Participate with your energy. And in that silent hospital, as the hallways returned to their routine, something remained out of place. Because when they went to look for the room again, all they found was a blank wall, as if it had never existed. But the patient was alive. Today, you will learn about a true and mysterious story of angelic intervention that took place inside a hospital, and that defies all logic. It is not an urban legend, nor a story made up to thrill. It is a testimony experienced by people who were not looking for miracles, but who, somehow, were surprised by something greater than any human planning. It is about a presence that arrives without warning, acts silently, and then disappears as if it had never existed. The patient in question was a simple woman, a mother of 3 children, who had been rushed to hospital due to a generalized infection. Her body was weak, her fever was high, and the doctors were no longer hiding the gravity of the situation. In the hallway, her husband tried to be strong, but his eyes could not hide his fear. Beside him, his eldest daughter was clutching a rosary so tightly that her fingers turned red. The atmosphere was dense, as if time were suspended there, between now and maybe never again. And it was precisely in this vacuum of hope that she appeared. The nurse, no one saw where she came from, but she appeared with a kind of peace that cannot be explained. a presence that did not need to raise her voice to calm, nor touch to comfort. She came to the bed and looked into the patient's eyes as if they already knew each other. She did not ask about tests, nor did she seem worried about the equipment. She simply said, "You still have a mission. It is not time." And with that, she led the woman down a silent hallway to the room in question. What happened in that space is the kind of thing that science is still trying to translate into protocols, but that the soul recognizes as truth. The temperature changed. The body stopped shaking. A soft light, which no one could explain, took over the room, and the patient, who had barely been able to speak hours before, fell asleep with a slight smile on her face. She woke up hours later, with the feeling that she had been somewhere else. Not exactly a dream, but a gap between worlds. A place where pain could not reach, where time seemed irrelevant. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what really intrigues us about this story is not just the room, which later disappeared, or the nurse that no one saw again. What shakes us to the core is the idea that there is something behind the scenes in life, something that acts when everything seems lost. Maybe you call it an angel, a spiritual presence, a guardian. Maybe you prefer not to give it a name. But the truth is that, in decisive moments, the invisible manifests itself, and almost always in a way that we only notice later. How many times, when you look back, have you noticed that certain coincidences were actually answers? How many times has a word, a delay, an unknown person, changed the course of your day, or even your entire life? There is a hidden truth in the way life is organized. It is not just chance, it is purpose disguised as routine. And when you start to see this, your mindset changes. You stop fighting what you don't understand, and start to see the signs as parts of a guided journey. This hospital story is just one example, but it connects to something much bigger. The quiet transformation that happens when you realize you're not alone, that there is a higher intelligence, a gentle but powerful force, that puts the pieces back together even when everything seems to be falling apart. Whether or not you believe that is up to you, but the signs, they keep coming, more and more, frequently, to those who are awake enough to notice. And here's the bottom line. This journey isn't about proving anything. It's about feeling, noticing, paying attention to what vibrates differently, to every little detail that carries a message, to someone's look on the subway, to that song that plays at just the right time, to the unexpected phone call. None of this is random, and the story of the angel nurse is one of those clues, a reminder that there is something sacred at work, even when our eyes can't see it. If this touched your heart, right? I felt that, too. The hospital was like any other white hallways, the smell of disinfectant, doors slamming softly, machines beeping in different tones. But that night, there was something in the air. It wasn't visible, but it was perceptible, as if time had slowed down, as if the professionals' smiles were more forced, as if the environment itself knew that something serious was about to happen. In room 309, lying on a cold bed, was the fragile body of a woman who seemed to have already given up. She was breathing with difficulty. Her skin was pale, her lips dry, and her eyes closed in a fatigue that wasn't just physical, was existential. She had arrived at the emergency room days earlier with abdominal pain and a persistent fever. What seemed like a simple infection had become alarmingly worse. The tests were not correct, the medications were not working, and the doctors, although experienced, were already talking about palliative protocols, a term that was too cold for someone who, outside the door, was still holding hands in prayer. The youngest daughter refused to leave. She slept on a hard chair, woke up with a start, and every time the nurses came into the room, she held her breath, waiting for the worst news. Her husband, a man of restrained faith, kept his composure so as not to break down, but it was clear that he carried a weight on his shoulders, the fear of having to say goodbye, and, between one tear and another, that question that so many have asked at times like this: why now? Why her? The professionals did their best. They were racing against time. Her body temperature rose, her heart rate fluctuated, and the machines recorded a silent battle between the limits of her body and the resistance of her soul. It was as if something bigger was deciding her fate right there, at that moment, and on the outside, no one could find words to describe that pain. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject. There is something that few people realize when they talk about spiritual experiences in times of crisis. Many people think that divine signs only appear in moments of peace, meditation, and unshakable faith. But often, they appear in the complete opposite of this. In the midst of despair, doubt, and a feeling of abandonment. It is there, at the edge of pain, that invisible forces approach, and it is not by chance. It is because, in these moments, the heart is naked. The armor of control falls, the ego falls silent, and the soul finally whispers, "Help me." And this call is always heard. The intervention begins long before it is noticed. Sometimes it is a professional who insists on an extra test, a technician who comes on duty without being scheduled, a system failure that takes the patient to another sector, details that seem like errors or randomness, but that hide larger gears in motion. These are the behind the scenes of spirituality infiltrating human routine. Small deviations that, when looked at carefully, reveal decisions guided by something higher. In this woman's case, the first sign was silence. At the height of the mental noise, the medical rush, the emotional weight, there was a pause. Everything stopped for a few seconds. The machine that had previously been beeping uncontrollably emitted only a continuous, steady sound. The nurse, in charge of the shift, was called to another floor, and suddenly, a new presence entered the room. No one saw her arrive. She was just there, with a clipboard in her hands, a calm smile, and a gaze that pierced through matter. She didn't wear a name tag. Her uniform was different, white but with an old-fashioned, elegant cut, almost out of date. She introduced herself only by her first name, which her daughter couldn't remember later. She said something softly, placed her hand on the patient's forehead, and quietly asked to be taken to another room, a quieter room. No one questioned her. There was a calm authority about her that needed no explanation. The patient was led down a side corridor, which her family later swore did not exist. And what happened next cannot be explained in words. Because not everything that is real is measurable. There are things that only the heart understands and that escape the evidence. Comment here. That makes sense to me. As the patient was slowly led away by the calm-looking woman, the family stood still in the same spot in the hallway, as if time had frozen around them. The room was colder than usual, and it wasn't just a feeling of heat, it was as if the atmosphere itself was weighted with uncertainty. The sounds of the hospital, usually constant and mechanical, now seemed distant, muffled, as if they were coming from another plane. Separate from the painful reality unfolding there, the white light coming from the ceiling made everything more impersonal. No place there seemed welcoming. Everything was rigid, functional, empty. And it was in this scenario, in this atmosphere suspended between life and death, that their faith began to crack. Not because they had stopped believing, but because tiredness, exhaustion, and helplessness were already eroding every layer of their emotional resistance. They had spent days sleeping in uncomfortable chairs, long nights listening to uncertain diagnoses, prayers said with hope and received with silence, and yet, they had remained. But now, something inside them was beginning to break. The patient's mother, who had been standing firm until then, felt her body give way. She leaned against the wall, as if seeking some kind of invisible support there, and finally let the tears escape. There was no holding them back. She sobbed softly, trying to hide the pain, but it was evident. This woman, accustomed to being the foundation of the family, was now bent over by the fear of losing her daughter. She walked a few steps away from the others and sat alone on a plastic bench in the corner of the hallway, with her elbows resting on her knees and her face in her hands. She began to pray, but it wasn't a memorized prayer, the kind you recite automatically. It was an intimate lament, a heartfelt cry. She spoke softly, stumbling over her words, like someone who no longer knows how to pray but still tries. She wasn't asking for a spectacular miracle. She was asking for mercy, for a sign, for some presence that would confirm that she wasn't there alone, in the middle of that nightmare. She was asking for meaning, for direction, for the slightest bit of light that could cross that tunnel of pain. From across the hall, her husband watched. In silence, on the outside, he tried to remain rational. He wasn't the type to break down, but on the inside, his heart was in ruins. His oldest daughter, who had been standing next to the stretcher until then, began to pace in circles, restless, overwhelmed by the urgency and confusion. Something about it didn't make sense. Where were they taking her mother, who had authorized it? She went to the nurse's station and asked about the change. The answer was short and curt. We didn't authorize it. Maybe it was another department. But when she checked the records, there was nothing. No transfers registered. No changes in the system. No employee with the name mentioned by the nurse. It was as if everything was being erased. As it happened, now I want to go even deeper into this subject. It is in moments of complete emptiness, when there is no strength left or answers, that something silent approaches, a force that does not ask for permission to act, that does not depend on logic, nor does it need to be understood. It is in these invisible backstages of existence that major decisions begin to happen, and they are not triggered by perfect prayers or grand demonstrations of faith, but by the vulnerable heart, by the soul that finally surrenders. It is when we stop trying to control the outcome and simply surrender. That is the turning point, and that is when many interventions happen. Spirituality does not only act when everything is calm. It manifests itself mainly in chaos. When everything seems lost, it is as if an invisible thread is pulled, realigning the paths without us noticing. The mother's heart, exposed and sincere, was being heard. Each word spoken in despair had an impact on the other side of reality. It was not mysticism, it was real, and this reality was in motion. Transformation begins before it becomes visible, and this applies to everything: healing, faith, reconciliation, and life. We tend to think that miracles are like fireworks full of sparkle and noise, but in reality, the greatest miracles are silent, discreet, almost invisible. Like a door without a number that opens when all seems lost. Like a serene presence that enters without fanfare and changes the course of things without demanding credit. That family didn't know it yet, but they were already part of a bigger journey. They were being guided, supported. Maybe not in the way they wanted, but with the precision of what they really needed. And the change had already begun. Not with a snap, but with a vibration, a different frequency that entered that hospital and began to reorganize everything from within. Despair was not the end. It was the beginning of opening up, of listening, of awakening. While digital records denied the existence of the change, and protocols remained rigid in their systems, faith, even though shaken, began to be reborn in the form of presence. Not that triumphant faith, but the faith that resists. In the midst of pain, the faith that whispers, it continues. Something is happening, and it was. Even though no one there could explain it. Come in here. I feel the presence. She appeared as if she already knew where she was supposed to be. There were no hurried footsteps or movement in the hallways. No one saw her coming, and yet, suddenly, she was there in the midst of that silent chaos, like a pause between two heartbeats. She was wearing an impeccable white uniform, but it was not like the others. The fabric seemed older, the cut had a retro, almost out-of-date feel, and there was something about her presence that didn't fit in with the hospital environmental lightness, a tranquility so profound that it seemed out of place in the world. The first to notice her was her eldest daughter. She turned her head, and, as if by reflex, her eyes fixed on the figure approaching with slow steps and a serene posture. The woman was not carrying clipboards or pushing equipment. She simply walked with her hands clasped in front of her body, as if she were storing precious energy. When she met the young woman's gaze, she gave a slight smile, and it was at that moment that everything seemed to quiet down. A subtle warmth took over the room. It was as if the air stopped being heavy. Her daughter could not explain it, but at that moment, she felt a peace she had not felt in days. The woman stopped at the front of the group, looked into the eyes of the patient's mother who was still sitting with her head bowed and said, in a soft, firm tone, "It's okay. I've come to help." Her voice was low, but penetrating. Each word had a gentle weight, as if it carried truth and comfort at the same time. Without making a fuss, she approached the patient, who was breathing hard at the time, and placed a hand on her forehead. The temperature of her skin, which had been hot and feverish, seemed to stabilize immediately. It wasn't a medical touch, it was a human, spiritual touch. Impossible to describe precisely. It was untechnical, but it had an impact. It was as if a greater energy flowed through that gesture. Her husband tried to ask who she was, what shift she was on, what department she was from, but before he could say anything, she simply answered, as if reading his thoughts, "I was called," and then she added, "I'm going to take her to a quieter room, a place where she can truly rest." There was no fear or resistance. Her authority was different from that of the hospital staff. It was subtle, but unquestionable. Something there said, without words, that they could trust her, that this woman was not ordinary, and that perhaps, precisely for that reason, she was there at that moment. They watched in silence as the nurse wheeled the patient's stretcher down a side hallway. No one dared to follow her. No one tried to stop her. The feeling was that, at that moment, any interference would break something sacred. The mother stood up, her eyes still wet, and watched as long as she could. Her husband remained motionless, and the daughter simply held her father's arm, as if trying to anchor herself in some certainty. The stretcher continued toward a less busy wing, a part of the hospital that, later, no one would be able to locate precisely. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. There comes a time, on great spiritual journeys, when human logic needs to give way to that which escapes the eyes. When we look only with our bodily senses, we miss the greatest signs. But when our hearts open, when our minds quiet down and our perception changes frequency, we are able to see what lies behind what is visible. It is at this point that the figures we call angels appear. Not those with wings and halos, but those sent, the presences that take on human, or almost human forms to fulfill specific missions at specific moments. They are like tools of light, activated when everything seems to be falling apart. This nurse, this woman with the sweet voice and the welcoming gaze, wasn't just part of the scenery. She was the turning point, the piece that no one knew was missing. And her arrival was no accident. It was an answer to the mother's heartfelt plea, the father's silent surrender, the daughter's vulnerable heart. It was the materialization of something that many ask for, but few are able to recognize when it presents itself. Because these encounters don't come with formal introductions, they simply happen, and when they do, they leave an unforgettable mark. The patient's journey was being redirected. That special room the nurse spoke of didn't seem to be on the hospital maps, but that didn't make it any less real. It was a space of transition, a place where spiritual decisions are made, where unseen battles are fought, and where the soul finds what it needs, even if the body doesn't yet know it. Meanwhile, the family stood there in silence, feeling something they couldn't name, a kind of presence, an energy that seemed to have invaded the place and changed everything. They couldn't explain what was happening, but they knew they were in the presence of something sacred. something that was beyond their control, and yet, as close as a touch. Comment here, I felt that too. And perhaps the most impressive thing of all is precisely this: the silence with which these presences arrive. Without fanfare, without announcement, without detailed explanations, they only appear at the exact moment when the soul truly asks for help, not with pretty words, but with genuine surrender. And when this happens, everything changes. The vibration changes. The environment transforms. Perception expands. And that is when we understand. Nothing that is essential shouts. Everything that is sacred arrives gently. Speaking of which, if this type of content resonates with you, if this story touched you in some way and awakened this desire to delve deeper into the connection with something greater, there is a material that I prepared especially to complement all of this. It is called Reading Your Birth Angel and was designed to help you connect with personalized guidance from the angelic kingdom. In a direct, simple, and very profound way, it is a practical tool that can save you a lot of time on your journey and bring clarity at decisive moments in your life. If it makes sense to you, take a look at the material I left below. It is available now, but it may go offline at any time. So if you find it useful, take advantage of it while it is still available. It is all there in the description. Carefully prepared for those who feel this calling for something more spiritual and true. The path to that room seemed to not follow the hospital's internal logic. It was as if, with each step the stretcher took, the atmosphere became denser and, at the same time, softer. There was no rush, no voices, none of the agitated coming and going, typical of a hospital ward. It was almost as if they were crossing a kind of invisible border between the ordinary and the extraordinary. The daughter, who risked following at a certain distance, noticed that the corridors were no longer the same as before. The paint on the walls seemed lighter, the floor cleaner, and the lighting took on a hue that she could not explain, something between gold and pearl, as if it came from within the light itself. The nurse stopped in front of a white door. Different from all the others, it had no number, no identification, no sign above or next to it, as was standard in any room on that floor. Nothing, just a smooth, clean, almost ethereal door, a detail that would later come back to worry everyone involved. But at that moment, no one questioned it. The woman gently pushed the door open and led the stretcher inside. The environment inside was simple, but charged with something inexplicable. There was a bed, a chair, a window covered by a light curtain, and silence. A silence so deep that it seemed to have weight. But it was not a silence of absence. It was a silence of presence, of peace, of healing. The patient, who had been showing signs of pain and extreme fatigue until a few minutes before, seemed to fall asleep gently as soon as she crossed the threshold. Her face, previously tense, began to relax. Her breathing became steady, like that of someone who has finally found rest after a long journey. The nurse gently pulled the sheet up to the patient's shoulders, delicately adjusted the pillow, and sat down in the chair next to the bed. She said nothing. She just stood there, watching, present, in silence. The daughter tried to follow her to the end of the hallway, but as she turned the last corner, she was stopped by a night nurse. "There's no one there, Miss. That wing is under maintenance." The answer took her by surprise. She tried to explain that she had seen her mother being led away by another professional, who had entered a white door with no number, but the nurse in front of her just frowned, with a look somewhere between confused and suspicious, and said, "We don't have any doors like that. Maybe you got confused." It was at that moment that the first shock of reality began to set in. The young woman returned the same way. But now, everything seemed different. The corridors were busy again. The walls had gone back to that dull beige tone. The fluorescent light bothered her eyes again, and the peace she had felt disappeared. She ran to the reception, asked to see the bed transfer record, tried to explain what she had seen, but there was nothing. No name, no record, no change, no professional with the characteristics of the woman who had taken her mother. The patient's mother and father still in the waiting room began to feel the absence of time. 20, maybe 30 minutes had passed, but it felt like hours. The mother stood up, looked around, and listened for footsteps coming from the hallway. But there was nothing, only the sound of heart monitors and the distant echo of doctors' voices. A nurse appeared, asking for the patient. All hell broke loose. "She's been taken to another room," the father said. But no one knew which room it was. No one had authorized any transfer. The search began. Every department was searched. Every room was checked. No staff members seemed to have any idea what had happened. The daughter kept insisting on the white room with no number, but no one recognized it. One of the attendants suggested that perhaps she had mistaken it for an isolation room, but none of the rooms matched the description. It was as if the room had been erased from the physical layout of the hospital, as if it had been built for only a few minutes, only to disappear. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. There are times when reality behaves as if it were being folded. When time and space seem to obey another logic, a spiritual logic, which does not depend On our rational understanding, this is when decisions need to leave the sphere of the visible and enter a territory that can only be accessed through surrender and subtle perception. That room without a number, as absurd as it may seem, was exactly that, a space between worlds, a transition point, where matter and the invisible meet so that something greater can happen. This kind of event is not limited to faith or religious systems. It speaks to something universal, the inner journey that we are all on at some level, and at certain moments, this journey intersects with the extraordinary, with the exceptions, with the backstage of existence. And when this happens, it is not logic that explains it. It is consciousness. It is presence. It is surrender. What this story shows, in a subtle and profound way, is that there are passages in life that cannot be understood with the usual eyes. It is necessary to look with other senses. It is necessary to allow the heart to see what the records do not show, because not everything that is real can be measured. Not every truth can be documented. Some just need to be felt. If this touched your heart, write in the comments, I felt that too. What happened in that white room with no number goes beyond any rational explanation we can imagine. It was as if, in the silence of that almost magical room, a profound transformation was unfolding. Far from the hurried glances and noisy machines, the patient, who had been given up for dead by the medical team, began to show subtle signs of improvement. Small movements in her hands, her breathing that had previously been irregular and weak, now flowed more calmly and strongly. The monitors, that until recently had indicated a red alert, began to stabilize, bringing a sigh of hope to the hearts that watched from afar. She herself recounted an experience that many would find hard to believe. But for her, it was vivid, real, and moving. She felt a warmth emanating from within, a soft light that filled her entire being, as if an invisible but intensely loving presence were enveloping her body and soul. This presence, which she described as a healing embrace, brought tears to her eyes, stares of relief, gratitude, and an emotion that surpassed any pain or suffering. It was a moment of true transformation, not just physical but spiritual, a silent passage into a new state of consciousness and life. This sudden improvement, beyond traditional medical knowledge, shook the balance behind the scenes of that hospital institution. Doctors, nurses, and family members could not explain what was happening, since statistics, prognoses, and clinical experience had no answer for this unexpected recovery. It was a phenomenon that challenged the common mindset, an invitation to revisit concepts about what is possible and what is beyond the visible. It was a hidden truth revealed in silence and with profound impact, which was beginning to open doors to a new understanding of life and healing. For those who lived through that moment, the journey changed forever. Decisions that had previously seemed overwhelming, whether to keep fighting or accept fate, were softened by the intervention of this mysterious force. The weight of fear gave way to a hope that could not be explained but was felt intensely. And it is precisely in this tension between logic and mystery that the story finds its deepest strength, in the encounter between the human and the divine, in the convergence between the visible and the invisible, in the emergence of a new consciousness. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject. It is important to understand that the transformation that occurred there is not an isolated event, but part of a larger process that happens behind the scenes in the lives of many people. A true internal revolution, a change of mentality that invites us to look at pain and suffering with different eyes of surrender, faith, and perception beyond the physical. When the impossible happens, the impact goes far beyond the body. It touches the essence, redefines beliefs, and changes the course of existence. The patient not only recovered physically, but she brought with her a message that resonates with anyone who is sensitive enough to hear it, a message about the importance of keeping one's mind and heart open to the inexplicable, to that which cannot be explained by diagnoses or prognoses, a message that challenges us to recognize that not everything in life follows the logic of the material world, and that behind human decisions there is a hidden truth that acts in a subtle and powerful way. This story, with its unexpected moment of healing, reminds us that we are on a much greater journey than we can comprehend at first glance, that our choices, our beliefs, and our capacity to surrender influence not only our present, but the paths that unfold before us. That true strength lies not only in what we see, but in what we feel and accept as part of our experience. If this touched your heart, write in the comments, I receive. The family reunion after that episode was filled with a mixture of relief, gratitude, and a silent restlessness that no one could explain. The patient was better, stronger, with eyes that carried not only the light of recovery, but the mark of something transformative that had happened beyond what the eyes could see. But, as hope grew and hearts filled with renewed faith, a disturbing question began to arise, involving everyone in a mystery that seemed to have no easy answer. Who was that nurse? And, most importantly, where was the room where everything changed? As soon as the improvement became evident, the husband and eldest daughter tried to find the woman with the sweet voice and welcoming gaze to thank her for everything she had done. They wanted to understand better, to know where that special presence came from, so different from the other people who passed through the hospital. But, to their surprise, no one knew that nurse, no employee could identify her, or even remember anyone who fit that description. The names, the schedules, the records, everything seemed to indicate that she had never worked there, and the mystery didn't stop there. When they tried to locate the room where the patient was taken, the hospital records didn't indicate its existence. No door in that hallway had a number or identification. It was as if that space, that place of peace and silence, didn't belong on any known map within the hospital. A room with no registration, no explanation, a true enigma within the cold and rigid structure of traditional medicine. This discrepancy between what was experienced and what could be proven triggered a series of reflections on reality and its limits. We often believe that everything needs to be documented, recorded, and controlled in order to have value or truth. However, this story challenges us to question these certainties and make room for the inexplicable, for that which does not fit into conventional formats, but which has a real and profound impact on people's lives. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. What lies behind this room without a number and the nurse that no one knows? Beyond logic and records, there is a hidden truth that operates behind the scenes of our journey. An invisible field where decisions, healings, and transformations happen far from common perception. This truth cannot be reduced to documents or formal testimonies because it belongs to a dimension that goes beyond time and physical space. It is in this space that the mindset needs to expand, that internal decisions gain new weight, and that the impact of these experiences reveals itself. In a silent but powerful way, it is a truth that invites surrender, trust in what cannot be seen, and the recognition that, often what transforms most is not the immediate results, but the journey that begins from them. The family, amidst joy and mystery, was faced with an invitation to look at life with renewed eyes, to accept that there are invisible forces that act in our history, that cross our paths to guide, protect, and transform us, and that we cannot always understand the reason or the method, but we can choose to welcome this presence and allow it to guide us. That the experience of that night in the hospital was not just a miraculous intervention, it was an awakening to a new way of perceiving reality, a call to broaden our vision and recognize that, behind our doubts and fears, there is a greater wisdom working behind the scenes of existence. And this wisdom often manifests itself through people, places, and moments that seem inexplicable, but which bear the mark of the divine. Comment there. I feel the presence. The search through the hospital records became a true journey for the family. After living through an experience that defied any rational explanation, they felt an almost urgent need to understand what had happened. Not only to lean on the security of the familiar, but because, deep down, they wanted to reaffirm that transformative reality. If the patient's improvement had been a miracle, then there had to be a place, a cause, a reason that could be found and understood, something tangible that would anchor that story. But the more they searched, the deeper the mystery deepened. The medical records showed no unusual movement. The charts showed no indication that she had been transferred to a different room from the one she had originally been admitted to. Questions to doctors and nurses all received the same answer, repeated with a mixture of confusion and astonishment. There is no such room. We've never heard of anything like it. We have no record of it anywhere. It was as if time had erased all evidence, as if that space had been created for a specific moment, a specific function, and then disappeared from the map of the hospital routine. A kind of invisible threshold between the physical and the spiritual, between the known and the unknown. The family began to understand that they were facing something that went far beyond the material world, a hidden truth that was not revealed in documents or medical protocols. They tried to speak to the administration, sought help from administrative departments, and even requested access to the hospital's security cameras. But nothing showed the nurse entering or leaving. Nothing recorded the patient's movement in a place that did not officially exist. The feeling that grew there was that reality had been doubled, that the experience of that night had been a fragment of another dimension that had simply infiltrated the common routine, bringing with it a profound transformation. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. This incessant search for answers is part of our natural mentality, that part of the mind that wants to understand, control, and dominate what happens to us. However, decisions that impact our lives are not always recorded behind the scenes in the physical world. Often, what really determines the course of events is between the lines, in the invisible decisions made by forces that operate on another frequency. This is where true transformation comes in, the kind that does not depend on visual proof or material evidence, but that acts on the essence of our journey, a transformation that changes our mentality, that defies reason, but that causes a deep and lasting impact on our being. The family, even in the absence of records, experienced this transformation, a change that could not be measured by any test, but that was written in every look, in every gesture, in the energy that permeated the environment. The mystery of that invisible room, invites us to reconsider our worldview and our relationship with what cannot be seen, touched, or tasted. It challenges us to recognize that there are dimensions where hidden truth acts silently, where crucial decisions are made, and where the impact of those choices reverberates in our lives in ways that we often cannot immediately understand. Furthermore, this search reveals a movement that takes place behind the scenes of existence. While the hospital routine continues its course, while protocols are followed, there is an invisible dynamic of care and intervention that does not appear in the reports, but which is real and effective. A care that goes beyond conventional logic and acts directly on the hearts of those who are open to receiving this energy. So this story is not just about a room with no number or an unknown nurse. It is about the journey of those who are willing to trust in the unseen, to accept that life can be transformed by forces that are not on the surface of events. It is about understanding that, in the midst of doubt and mystery, there is a realm of possibilities where miracles can happen, not as an exception, but as part of a larger process of evolution and awakening. This experience teaches us that sometimes we need to let go of the need to understand everything in order to truly connect with the depth of life. We need to make room for surprise, for the unexpected, for what challenges our concepts and logic. It is in this space of openness that true transformation takes place, that our mindset is renewed, and that the impact of these experiences reverberates throughout our existence. Comment: I'm on this journey too. Waking up after days in a critical state, when the body seemed to have abandoned its will to live, is something capable of transforming anyone. But what this patient said after that awakening brought a weight and a light that went beyond common understanding and rational comprehension of what is possible. She spoke of an experience that seemed to have happened on another plane, a place where time, space, and even physical pain lost their strength and meaning. She described a light that was intense but not painful, a light that welcomed and warmed. Unlike any other light she had ever known, this light, she said, was pure and vibrant, able to penetrate the shadows that had previously enveloped her. It was not just a glow, but a presence that exuded calm and hope. Along with this light came sounds she had never heard before. Soft hymns, melodies that seemed to flow from an unseen source, a chant that lifted the soul and seemed to speak directly to her heart. And then, in the midst of this atmosphere of peace and transcendence, a radiant woman appeared. This figure was unlike anyone the patient had ever met. Her presence was engaging and serene, charged with a gentle authority, as if each word were an invitation to a path that lay beyond the visible. It was this woman who told her, "You have not yet completed your mission." These words echoed loudly within her, like a call from deep within her being. It was no vague phrase, but a clear and definitive message, one that brought with it the promise of a purpose that needed to be fulfilled, a journey that still needed to be taken despite what had happened. This revelation was not just a comfort, but a summons, a hidden truth that challenged all previous understanding of life, death, and destiny. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. This experience invites us to reflect on how our mindset is conditioned to interpret the limits of human existence. We are trained to believe that the end of a life is the end of a story, that death is a full stop that does not allow for additional paragraphs. However, reports like this patient's indicate that there is much more going on behind the scenes of reality, something that defies the boundaries of what science and reason can explain. The transformation that occurs in moments like these is not just physical or spiritual, but also mental. It reconfigures the entire way we see our journey and the decisions we make. The message "you have not finished your mission yet" resonates as a call to awaken awareness about the impact that our actions, choices, and even our presence can have on the world around us, far beyond what we imagine. This hidden truth, this dimension that touches the invisible, has profound implications for all of us. It invites us to embrace a new mindset, one that recognizes that our time here may be far from a mere coincidence or a sequence of disconnected events. On the contrary, we are part of a greater journey, where each step and each decision has real weight and meaning that transcends the immediate. Furthermore, this revelation shows us that in the midst of uncertainty, pain, and even despair, there is always a possibility of rebirth, an opportunity for transformation that is waiting to be activated. This light that the patient saw is a powerful symbol of this, a light that penetrates the darkness, that breaks down the barriers of fear, and that offers a path to healing and fulfillment. But more than that, this radiant woman who appeared to her represents what we might call a guide, a mentor, or an angel of force that works behind the scenes, guiding and supporting us, even when all seems lost. Her message reveals that we are not alone on this journey, that there are unseen forces committed to ensuring that our mission continues, that our impact on the world still has much to be accomplished. This awareness can radically transform the way we face daily challenges, our decisions, and the way we relate to the world. From this perspective, each difficulty ceases to be an insurmountable obstacle and becomes a necessary step in building something greater, a fundamental piece in the construction of our legacy. What this patient experienced leads us to an essential reflection on the importance of being attentive to signs, of keeping an open mind to the inexplicable, and of cultivating a faith that does not depend solely on what the eyes can see, because the journey of life is much more complex and rich than it appears. And it is precisely in its deepest layers that the greatest revelations and the most transformative impacts occur. That gentle voice, those firm words, and the feeling of an unfinished mission challenge us to look within, to question our own certainties, and to make room for the hidden truth to manifest in our existence. It is not just about believing in the impossible, but about recognizing that the impossible is often happening all around us, at levels that we are not yet able to fully access. This story also shows us how our mindset can be an obstacle or a bridge to these experiences. If we remain closed and skeptical, we may miss the opportunity to experience genuine transformation. But if we maintain an attitude of openness and trust, we will be able to receive the messages that the universe, or whatever is guiding us, sends us, and that's when the real impact begins to happen. When we are able to integrate these experiences, when we allow them to touch our essence and shape our future decisions. This integration is what sustains the continuity of the mission that the patient heard in that voice. A mission that is, in fact, collective and timeless. A mission that can be present in each of us. The light she saw was not just a fleeting vision, but an invitation to a profound transformation that involves body, mind, and spirit. An invitation for us to awaken to a new reality, where faith mixes with reason, where the invisible takes shape, and where our path can gain new meanings and directions. Comment there. That makes sense to me. Since the story of that patient began to spread, many people have become interested not only in the miraculous recovery, but also in the mysterious figure of that nurse with a sweet voice and a welcoming gaze, who seemed to appear from an invisible place to guide those moments of transformation. And the truth is that this was not an isolated experience. On the contrary, similar stories began to emerge, coming from different corners of the world, like small lights that illuminate a hidden truth, revealing that what seems extraordinary may, in fact, be part of a much larger phenomenon. In hospitals, across cultures and contexts, patients and family members have spoken of presences that appear at the most critical moments. Women who care with a tenderness that goes beyond ordinary care, who offer comfort when all seems lost, who carry an almost magical energy, and who often disappear as mysteriously as they arrived. These figures are described as nursing angels, not in the literal or religious sense, but as beings who embody a transformative energy, a type of intervention that goes beyond conventional medicine and that acts behind the scenes of life, with an invisible but powerful force. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. It is fascinating how these experiences, despite being so similar, appear in such different realities, from public hospitals in large cities to small clinics in remote regions. This recurrence points to something that goes beyond chance or simple emotional interpretation, a deep connection with what we can call the spiritual plane or parallel dimension, where healing happens at levels that science is still beginning to understand. Each story is a piece of a puzzle that invites us to expand our mindset, to accept that the human journey is not limited to what is tangible. This expansion is not an invitation to abandon rationality, but rather to incorporate a broader vision, where faith, science, and spirituality can dialogue, enriching our understanding of what is possible. And the impact this has on the lives of those who go through these moments is immense. It is not just about surviving a crisis, but about experiencing a profound transformation that alters the way we see the world, our decisions, and even our very existence. This transformation causes an internal change that reverberates in our attitudes, relationships, and the meaning we give to our personal journey. What is also striking is the way in which these angel nurses do not appear to offer empty promises, but to remind us of the mission that is yet to be fulfilled, of the inner strength that can still be awakened, of the purpose that remains even in the face of the fragility of the body. They are a symbol of this delicate balance between the human and the divine, between vulnerability and the strength that springs from surrender. Furthermore, these testimonies reinforce the idea that spirituality, far from being an abstract concept, is intimately linked to our everyday experiences and the real life behind the scenes. It manifests itself in the form of comfort, healing, guidance, and revelations that can completely transform a desperate situation into a turning point for something greater. This hidden truth, which is so often hidden behind the veil of routine and logic, is a call for each of us to make room for the unexpected, for the possibility that our own journey may be touched by these forces that act beyond immediate comprehension. And this openness is essential for us to be able to access these powerful transformations, which do not only happen externally, but mainly within our minds and hearts. As we observe these stories from around the world, we realize that we are not alone in this experience and that there is a silent movement taking place, an invisible network of healing and transformation that connects people, places, and moments in a way that defies conventional explanation. This network is what sustains hope and the certainty that, Even in the darkest hours, light can arrive in unexpected ways and change everything. And that is why these stories are not just curiosities or urban legends. They are tangible evidence that there is a dimension where the impossible becomes possible, where decisions that impact our lives are made at levels that are still being unraveled. They invite us to review our mindset, to question our certainties, and to give up absolute control, allowing true transformation to happen. The journey that began that night, in that hospital, with a family in despair and a patient in despair, is actually part of a much larger movement which involves many other testimonies, many other lives touched by these silent and protective presences. And understanding this connection helps us recognize that each of us can be part of a greater mission, with decisions that resonate far beyond what we can see. Now, thinking about all this, behind the scenes of these experiences, it is clear that this transformation is not just an isolated event, but an ongoing process of expanding consciousness. An invitation for us to become more attentive to what is happening around us and, especially, within us. This openness allows us to access revelations that were previously hidden, bringing clarity to difficult choices, strength to face challenges, and light to move forward. And that is exactly why this story resonates so deeply, because it brings a powerful message to our daily lives, even when everything seems lost. There is a plan, a force, a hidden truth that works so that we can continue, grow, and achieve what is yet to come. This understanding can transform the way we face not only extreme situations, but each moment of our own journey. Comment: I'm on this journey too. It is curious how, when faced with events that defy all logic, our minds desperately seek an explanation that makes sense within the reality we know. After all, what really defines an angel? Is it the traditional symbol of white wings, the celestial image that popular culture insists on showing? Or could it be that the true meaning of an angel lies much more in actions than in appearances? In attitudes that touch the heart and transform lives, even when we cannot see them with ordinary eyes. This reflection is essential to understanding what happened that night in that hospital, and why so many people around the world share similar stories of presences that go far beyond what medicine can explain. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. When we stop to think about it, we realize that the essence of what we call angels is deeply connected to something that goes beyond common human understanding. They are manifestations of unconditional love, of genuine care, of a force that acts silently and persistently behind the scenes of our lives. The impact of these presences is not limited to physical healing. They affect our mentality, invite us to make more conscious decisions, and encourage us to continue on our journey, even when all seems lost. This calls into question the idea of coincidence, because what we are observing are true interventions that open invisible doors and generate real transformations. The challenge is recognizing this intervention when it happens, because it often does not come with dazzling lights or grandiose sounds. It appears subtly, through welcoming words, gestures that convey hope, and moments that seem like small details but carry an immense weight in the balance of life. It is these actions, more than physical appearance, that define the presence of what we could call an angel, be it a person, an energy, a symbol, or something we have not yet been able to name. Throughout this reflection, we are invited to open our vision to something greater, to expand our mindset and realize that the human journey is permeated by hidden truths that can only be accessed when we are willing to leave behind absolute control and the rigidity of certainties. This openness allows us to see the profound impact that these silent interventions have not only on the body, but on the soul, the spirit, and the way we live and relate to the world. So the question that remains is not just whether what happened was divine intervention or mere coincidence. It is, how can we cultivate in ourselves the perception and receptivity so that these moments of love and healing can be recognized and experienced with the intensity they deserve? How can we allow these experiences to guide us towards a true transformation, one that goes far beyond physical recovery, touching the essence of our being and preparing us for even greater challenges and achievements? And this reflection has an incredible power to reconnect us with what is deepest within each of us, the ability to trust, to surrender, to open ourselves to the unknown, and above all, to recognize that life is made up of decisions that reverberate in multiple dimensions. This hidden truth, which sometimes seems distant, is closer than we imagine, just waiting for us to change our mindset to allow it in. As we delve deeper into this conversation, it becomes clear that what we call angels are not confined to a preconceived definition or image. They are manifestations of love that reveal themselves at the right time, in the right place, to those who are ready to receive. They are presences that remind us that, despite the difficulties and uncertainties, we are never truly alone in this complex and multifaceted journey. And it is precisely this openness to hidden truth, this ability to see beyond the obvious and to allow ourselves to be transformed by what we do not yet fully understand, that can be the key to navigating the profound changes that life presents us. From there, we begin to realize that each moment, each decision, each encounter carries a gigantic potential for impact, not only on our personal history, but on the invisible web that connects everything and everyone. And so, this reflection leads us to a much greater understanding of what it means to be alive, to be in constant transformation, and to be open to the revelations that arise when we least expect them. It is in this openness that we find the true strength to continue, the courage to move forward, and the certainty that even in the darkest moments, there is light, there is purpose, there is love. Comment there. That makes sense to me. Many times have you felt, at that exact moment when everything seemed to be falling apart, that someone appeared to hold your hand, to whisper a word of comfort, to calm the turmoil inside your chest, and, shortly after, simply disappeared as if they had never existed. This sensation, so strangely familiar to many, is as if life, in its immense complexity, reserves moments of pure intervention, silent, discreet, but with a profound and unforgettable impact. It is as if there were an invisible thread, an invisible connection that crosses time and space, uniting our moments of fragility with presences that we cannot explain, but that we feel with all the strength of our hearts. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. It is precisely in this encounter, fleeting, unexpected, and often inexplicable, that the essence of something much greater than ourselves resides. True transformation happens not only in big decisions, but in these subtle details that, first glance, seem too small to change the course of our history. However, when we look back, we realize that it was these moments, these temporary presences, that lit the spark needed for a turnaround, for a new mindset, for a clarity that was hidden under the weight of fear and doubt. This journey, marked by encounters that defy logic and surpass understanding, reveals to us the power of the invisible, that hidden truth, that reveals itself only to those who are willing to see with an open heart, to trust in the flow of life even when there is no tangible certainty. The impact of these connections goes far beyond the immediate. They reverberate in our future choices, in our courage to move forward, and in how we transform each challenge into an opportunity for growth. It is fascinating to think that behind the scenes of our lives, there is a constant movement, an interweaving of forces that act silently to guide us, to place in our path those we need to meet, exactly when we need it most. And this force is not just a spiritual abstraction. It manifests itself in attitudes, words, looks, gestures that, even if brief, carry the essence of unconditional love and true compassion. It is these small, everyday miracles that defy reason and invite us to reflect on what really matters. When we accept that life is made up of these mysterious interventions, we begin to change our mindset. We begin to see that every decision, every choice, is connected to a larger web, that coincidences are actually revelations in disguise, and that the journey is not a solitary one. This opens up space for a new way of living, one that is lighter, more conscious, more aligned with what we call our inner truth, a mindset that recognizes the importance of the impact we have on each other, even when we don't fully understand the reasons behind it. And of course, this openness to the invisible invites us to live with greater presence and gratitude, to value each encounter and each gesture that, however simple it may seem, carries with it enormous transformative potential. This perception strengthens us to face the challenges that are yet to come, knowing that, even when all seems lost, there are forces working in our favor, leading us to where we need to be, even if the path seems uncertain or unknown. The power of these fleeting connections, these presences that appear and disappear, lies precisely in their ability to make us reevaluate our vision of the world, of life, and of ourselves. They remind us that sometimes what we need most is not a concrete solution, but a gesture of love that lights an inner light, that renews our hope and strengthens our faith, not necessarily traditional faith, but the deeper faith that is born of surrender, acceptance, and the courage to move forward. That is an invitation to look behind the scenes of our personal history and recognize that not everything is under our control, but that we can choose the mindset with which we face the surprises, pains, and joys that are presented to us. This choice has a real, tangible impact that manifests itself in our ability to grow, reinvent ourselves, and embrace the transformation that life constantly proposes. And so, this reflection leads us to realize that, deep down, what connects us to these presences that appear and disappear is a universal truth: the human need for belonging, love, and meaning. It is this need that moves not only our decisions, but also the course of our journey, and that makes us believe that, despite the difficulties, we are always being guided by something greater. Comment. I'm on this journey to. Sometimes, divine signs are closer than we imagine, so subtle that they can go unnoticed, almost disguised in simple gestures, in words that touch the soul, in the welcoming gaze of a person who appears when we least expect it, or even in that place that does not seem to exist to the world, but that for those who live it carries all the power of a profound truth. These signs do not follow a clear or predictable pattern. They present themselves in different forms, as if they were messages coded by life for those who have eyes to see beyond the obvious. And it is precisely in this mystery that the beauty of transformation lies, in the ability to recognize, accept, and act on these moments that, at first glance, may seem small, but that carry an impact capable of changing everything. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. When we start paying attention to details that previously went unnoticed, our mindset begins to open up to new possibilities. We begin to understand that life's journey is not just made up of big events, but also of small revelations that happen behind the scenes, in the gaps of everyday life, between the lines of our stories. Every unexpected gesture, every word that touches the heart, every meaningful look can be a fundamental piece in the puzzle of our personal transformation. This leads us to reflect on how our decisions are influenced by these invisible forces, by these hidden truths that, even without our full understanding, guide us to where we need to be. Often, the impact of these connections goes beyond logic and defies reason, but that is exactly where we find the magic, in the recognition that there is something beyond what we can touch, measure, or explain, something that invites us to trust more, to surrender more, and to be open to what the universe has in store for us. And it is in this scenario of mystery and discovery that we perceive the power of the invisible, which manifests itself in unexpected ways. Whether it is in a phrase from a stranger that appears at the right moment, in a hand that reaches out to help, in a light that seems to shine brighter in a moment of darkness, or in that room without a number that no one recognizes, but that holds the peace and healing that seemed impossible. It is these moments that remind us that life is a constant transformation, an invitation for our mentality to be renewed, for our decisions to be guided by something greater, by a truth that transcends the visible. This realization not only changes the way we see the world, but also transforms the way we relate to ourselves and others. We begin to appreciate the little things more, to see signs where before we only saw coincidences, and to recognize that each step of our journey has a purpose, even when it is not immediately clear. This helps us navigate uncertainty with more confidence, knowing that we are not alone, that there is an invisible support network that sustains and guides us. And it is this awareness that invites us to live in a more present and connected way, to realize that true healing and transformation happen when we are attentive to what the universe offers us, even if in discreet and unexpected ways. It is a call to open our eyes and hearts to the opportunities that arise at every moment. 2. The signs that lead us to choices that are more aligned with our essence and mission. This openness allows us to experience a profound impact, which reverberates not only in our lives, but also in those around us. Thus, by recognizing that divine signs can manifest themselves in so many different ways, we are invited to cultivate a mindset of attention and gratitude, to embrace the journey with courage and curiosity, and to allow the revelations that come to us to lead us on a path of greater fulfillment and meaning. After all, the mystery of life lies precisely in the beauty of the unexpected, in the strength of encounters that change everything, and in the power of love that manifests itself, even when we cannot explain it. Comment there, that makes sense. To me, if this story touched you, it is because something deep inside your heart recognized that presence, that energy that transcends common understanding. Perhaps you have already felt that invisible hand that appears in the most difficult moments, that gentle light that guides without us realizing it, that inexplicable warmth that touches the soul and transforms everything around it. The truth is that these encounters, as mysterious as they may seem, are part of a greater journey, of a profound transformation that cannot be seen, but that can be felt intensely. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding these experiences is not just about accepting the inexplicable, but rather opening your mind to a new mindset, where decisions are made based on signs that come from beyond reason, revelations that arrive like small clues behind the scenes of life, which show us that there is a much greater impact happening than we can understand at first glance. When you allow this hidden truth to guide your steps, you realize that every detail, every gesture, and every moment are fundamental to building your path, and that changes everything. These signs are not just coincidences, they are turning points that invite us to reflect on what really matters, on how our choices influence not only our destiny, but that of everyone around us. It is a connection that goes beyond the physical, that touches the spirit and activates a consciousness that transforms our vision of the world and our relationship with the unknown. And even though it is sometimes difficult to put into words, this experience calls us to a journey of self-knowledge and expansion, where true healing begins when we open ourselves to the invisible. And it is precisely in this openness that we find the greatest power of transformation, one that does not depend solely on logic, but on surrender and trust in that which we cannot see, but can feel deeply. It is an invitation for us to change the way we perceive the world, to adapt our mentality to receive the messages that come our way, to make decisions based on what our soul knows, even if our mind still questions us. This hidden truth guides us along unexpected but meaningful paths, where each step impacts not only our story, but also the universe around us. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope today, and tell me in the comments. Have you ever experienced something similar? Maybe you've also met an angel. Comment, I receive, right? I'm on this journey too. Say in the comments, I am a chosen one. If this touched your heart, right? I felt this too. What does this awaken in you? Tell me in the comments. Let's see how many chosen ones are here. Comment, I'm waking up. If you've been watching this far, comment, I won't stop here. Show me that you're here with me. Right, I keep going now. Following this deep connection, we will explore the unfolding of this story and what it reveals about the invisible forces that act in our daily lives, the decisions that shape our destiny, and the behind the scenes of this hidden truth that so many of us feel, but few know how to explain. If you've made it this far, it's because this story really touched something inside you, and that's already a sign that we're walking together on this journey of discovery and transformation. If you want, leave a comment. I'm not stopping here, or I'm on this mission. I love knowing who is truly connected to this energy. And, of course, if this message touched your heart, a like on the video is always a kind way to acknowledge this encounter we had. This exchange that goes beyond words. There is a video here that complements this subject. Click and follow me there, so we can dive even deeper into these truths that are sometimes hidden, but that have a real impact on our lives. After all, this journey is made up of small steps, revelations, and choices that change everything from the inside out. See you next time.